write it down in a notebook. I started it with a bang at the beginning and a bang at the end, and I went from there. I filled in, how do I get through conflict to the end? There's a lot of feeling in the movie. A lot of it's about being betrayed, being promised things, and those things not coming through. And I wanted to get that across. And any people writing, use your downfalls. Don't look at them, be depressed by them. Write those down. Think about them. Write them down as a scene. And the scenes that you throw away, you'll be using it in your next movie, your next graphic novel.
Welcome to Pages of Purpose. I'm your host, Isaac Smith. Today's episode, we're going to meet Robert Allen Falls, the author of FanatiKal. FanatiKal is a story about a rising comic book star, Miles Redding, and the prices he is asked to pay to achieve his dream. It's a classic battle between good and evil and involves radical fans, cult worship, ancient history, and questioning your own beliefs. In this book, Robert does a good job of breaking down just what the comic book industry looks like on the other side. Not what we see at maybe a Comic-Con or a fan meetup, but really what it's like between the publishers, the artists, and the authors, and how business can be done. It takes some liberties and maybe stretches what it's like for the sake of the story, but he really brings a great degree of authenticity to what it looks like. He also taps into some of his other pleasures and curiosities and things he likes to write about pertaining to goth culture, ancient history, and just a few other elements that he brings in. Now, Robert brings something to this episode that we have not been able to have in any other episode so far. A recurring theme is how a lot of authors tend to see their stories as movies as they adapt them into a book. Robert did it the other way around. He made the movie first and then put the book together to help spread the story and for us to enjoy. So if you have any questions pertaining to how all that works, this is definitely a great place to start. If you're new to the show, be sure that you pause real quick so that you can subscribe and leave us a 5-star review and make sure you never miss a new episode. And with that out of the way, let's go to the interview. Robert, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
I appreciate you making the time, and I have some questions for you that I have not been able to ask any guests so far, so this is going to be a fun one for me. But let's start out just with who you are and tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay, my name's Robert Falls. I came out with a book called FanatiKal. It's basically the story of fanatical fans that are obsessed with comics and comic conventions, and he's opposing, there are two dark forces seeking his services, and he's trying to keep his integrity with this shady comic book company. There's some violence and drama and dark secrets involved within.
Where did the title come from, FanatiKal? Is this something that has an origin, or is it just something that came to you?
Yeah, I based it on fanatical fans, that I've met at many a comic convention. And fan, of course, is short for fanatic. So I gave it more of a mystical name and put a K. It's not the proper spelling. I got that idea from Quentin Tarantino when he did Inglourious Bastards. He spelled bastard B-A-S-T-E-R-D. So thanks, Quentin.
So let's get into some of the questions that I have for you that are unique to this book. Usually when there's a book that comes to an interview like this that I deal with, it is a straight linear book. It is something you find at a library. But with what you have, it was written more as a screenplay. And that caught my attention immediately. There are a few books that I've read in my life that were written this way, and it's fun. Did this start as something else like a screenplay or as a movie?
It started as a movie. I wrote my first screenplay, real screenplay, not an improvised one, because this is my second movie. I wrote a real script and I typed it out on Final Draft, and the book is from that actual movie.
Is this a beat for beat copy from what the movie was into book form, or is this a different interpretation of what it originally was?
It's pretty much so, yeah, except for some scenes I had to cut out for budget constrictions. purposes, and it's pretty much beat for beat. There's a little more in the book. We're talking dialogue or a few things I added, and there's a little more in the movie. So it's different in both ways, but the same basic story.
So what goes into writing a screenplay? People, you can go to past episodes that we've done if you want questions on how to write a book, but tell me a bit more about how to write a story in this format. What are the challenges? What are the struggles that go into that?
Well, writing a screenplay, I've been battling that for years. It's a unique way that I started it. I was intimidated by the 8.5, 11 page. I got to fill all that with dialogue and scenes. When I started out, I wrote a lot more dialogue, and I had to edit it like 3 times tighter, 3 times less dialogue. I first started writing it out on my downtime at work. I was a proofreader in Manhattan, and on my downtime, I wrote the script on a 5x7 notebook, and I did little drawings, and then I was just copying it onto Final Draft. And then, a friend of mine would say, "Oh man, Robert, this is really talky." And I said, I know. And then it was edited down. I think I did 3 rewrites.
Well, let's jump into the content of the book. You mentioned earlier the name comes from some of the fans that you've met in your life. Is this based off of any real event that's happened to you or that you've seen?
Is the fans? Yeah. I'm sure you know who Frank Miller is.
Mm-hmm.
The interview in the book that was also in the movie, that was shot in front of Midtown Comics. We couldn't show the logo. We couldn't show any copywritten stuff. But we hired actors there in front of Midtown Comics. It's based on when I met Frank Miller in the late 90s, and I waited maybe like an hour and a half in line to meet him. And he's a great guy. And one of the scenes, there's an obsessive fan named Neil Mosier. It's based on me if I was a psycho, and he's asking him for his representation. He wants to send him a promo book, and I said the exact same thing. And he was very nice to me, and he said, "Send it to Bob Schreck." And I thought, is that character out of a cartoon or something? And he gave me the exact email, and I never ended up doing it anyway, but it's based on that.
No, I've had a new recent appreciation for Miller from an interview I saw him do with Nerdrotic. I think it was a couple months ago, and they just went into so much history behind comics, behind the work he's done, behind the work that he didn't do but he wanted to do, and there's this whole world that comes with the comic world. Kind of a repetitive thing to say, but a different type of storytelling that's really, really fun. Talk to me about comics. That plays a huge role for the main character and in a lot of this book, but talk to me about how that's influenced your life and influenced the story that you wanted to tell.
It influenced me a lot. Because he's a famous comic book artist, he's a legend in this business, and I always wanted to meet him. I met several big comic book artists. They also influenced me. They liked my art, which I was flattered by. And I always wanted, for a long time, wanted to make a movie regarding comics. And, not the superhero stuff, although a superhero does appear in an original character I created, the Mysterious Woodsman, in the movie, in the comic book. It's about behind the scenes, about a comic book company and the comic book creators.
So let's go into some of the characters. I know you have the main character, Miles Redding. Tell me about Miles and tell us about who he is and the role that he plays.
Well, Miles is kind of a controversial character. He doesn't like how the business has been taken over with anime and manga and dark material. I could talk about kind of like the Vertigo stuff that DC has done, still doing, but I like it. I do like it. That's just the character, and he's like me, but he's not all like me. He's a bit of a rebel and he's a bit of a risk taker. He's a pretty compelling character.
What are some of the characteristics and attributes that you wanted to embed into him that you feel you share?
Like I said, the rebellion part, the controversial part, because, I feel people today are pretty phony. I mean, I'm generalizing, but they don't stand up for what they believe. Miles does. And he gets in some business with the boss for Cinematic Comics because of it. And that's a, conflicting scene. And, in a drama or a thriller, you got to have conflict. I don't think it has to be in like every scene, like people are saying. There have to be scenes where people get along and, that kind of brotherhood. But there's a lot of conflict in the story.
Well, there's a couple other characters in the story that I wanted to ask you about, and I lumped them together in how I'm asking the question, but we have Thorn versus Luna. And to me, it kind of seems as if it's evil versus good, or like the shoulder devil versus the shoulder angel kind of thing for Miles. Where did these characters come from, and how did you create them?
As far as Luna goes, I really like the name. I later changed her last name to Longoria. But anyway, Luna's an interesting character. She's almost like a co-lead. I gave her star billing, and she plays Miles' wife, and she believes in him, and she believes in his art. She's very supportive, and she's a nanny in her spare time. And they live in this really cool apartment filled with sci-fi stuff and Egyptology that I had rented out from a guy who unfortunately passed away. And it was just an amazing place, and I thank him for letting me use it. It was a big part of the movie. And as far as Thorn goes, it was based on a professional wrestler, actually.
Really?
Yeah, there was a guy named Thorn. He was a vampire. That influenced me a lot because I like vampires, and anyone who loves goths will love this movie because I always found the whole goth movement fascinating, and I also put some ancient history in there as well. And I had a painting made of King Alaric, who had conquered Rome in August 28th, 410 AD. And I made it that these modern day Goths who want to hire Miles to do this dark material that he's fighting against, his wife is very much against it. They're offering him all this money to do a one-shot issue that's very bloody and violent, and she's against it. She thinks they're going to take him away and kill him. And they're actually vampire goths, and they worship King Alaric, and they got a painting of him in their mansion. So I thought that was a neat little take in the movie.
I gotta ask, because there's so many parallels in between what the industry is really like and then this story that you've written. Is there anything like that in the comic world where people make material and it goes to a really dark place in their personal lives, or is this something just completely unique to the story?
This is something unique to the story. It's I've never seen it before. I've seen some, I still buy comics to this day, or every Wednesday or so when they come out, and there's still some good stuff. I'm more an art guy, not a story guy. I love a good story in comics, but if the art isn't there, I'm not going to be interested. I haven't seen anything like that, no.
Well, one of the things we talked about before getting on the call was your love of ancient history, and you mentioned Egyptology earlier, and that's something I've actually seen in the industry as well. There's this big culture behind the hidden mysteries of the world. Like right now you're wearing a shirt that says, "Do you believe in UFOs?" That seems to be something else that's really big in this culture, in this community. Where does that come from, and what causes people to unite behind it in such a way, whether it's your story or someone else's story?
Well, I would guess like Reverend Jim Jones or something like that. You have to convert them, but you have to reach him in a, to my knowledge, a unique, something unique like the goth movement or an original character. Or I decided to make a, I'm not a dark person, but this is a very dark story. It's a drama, a thriller, and a dark suspense movie. It's a very popular medium. That's why I decided to make it about that.
Continue on that thought real quick. Having gone through making a movie, what are the big differences? I should ask because I know there's filming, there's art, there's a different kind of budget, there's all these other aspects. But the difference in between writing a movie and writing a book, what are some of the big differences? Because when I talk to authors, usually they're thinking about their book in terms of a movie. They're doing this the opposite way that you've done it. So having been on that other side, what advice could you give them?
Write it out. Start in a notebook like I did. Read so many books on screenwriting, at least 12 books, all the Sid Field books. But the best book I took screenwriting seminars, you name it. Best book I ever read was called Save the Cat. It's got a cat hanging on a rope on the cover, and it's a book about finishing that screenplay. And I'll tell you, I almost finished it by then, but it laid it out perfectly, and it was fun. It wasn't any dreary, formulaic type of thing that you had to do. Anyone that reads it, that's the best advice I could give. And also get the screenwriting software, Final Draft. That made it so easy. You can edit scenes and flip them here and there, the middle, the end, in between. And it helped me a lot. And just look at your movie, look at your graphic novel very visually. I put the visuals down, I draw first, and then I add the dialogue. I work the Marvel way. But with writing the script, it was kind of both. I'd draw some drawings. Comic books taught me how to read, around the time of junior high school. Well, a little before, but it was not until junior high school they made us read Lord of the Flies, one of my favorite all-time books. I could finally see the images in the words by William Golding, is it, the writer? Amazing book. And comic books, I could only read the books that had like illustrations. I said, oh, okay, I know what the chapter's about now. I get the gist of it in one picture. So anyone that has a problem with reading, read comics. I think it's one of America's greatest art forms next to movies.
Excellent. No, I think that's excellent advice. What is the future plans regarding this story? You've gone from movie to book. Are you going to go into another medium next, or are you going to just continue helping this story get out wherever it can?
Well, I'm going to try to get the story get out any way I can with promotion, which I'm now been working on for several months. But I would love to see it, become a movie, but people have to know about it. A bigger budget movie, it works better. And I had a couple more exciting scenes in it that I had to can because of budget constrictions. I tried to rent this house, and the woman wanted too much money. And then there was a scene where I had to come out with an attack dog, and Mosier was outside our apartment, building complex, whatever, and I chased after him with my attack dog with a 38 and blew out his window with a gun. And I put this all in the script, but I had to shelve it. There was another scene where, the bullies, the kid that gets bullied at school, the goths come and pick him up. They take him under their wing, and they try to have him turn against Miles. And this kid originally idolized Miles, and these two bullies are very intimidating. They intimidate bully two kids, but we only had one of them, and the kid was a good actor, but they wanted too much money to shoot this scene. These guys were greedy, and they wanted a part, and the guy wanted to put his girlfriend in it. Come on, that's and that kind of shelved that, and you just put a big X on the scene, and you'd be surprised how good you feel once you make those decisions. But if they ever do a big budget, we'll put those back.
Is there anything that you had to cut from the book? Thinking about this in the context of a movie, every movie has deleted scenes. Every movie has something that didn't make the final cut. Was there anything like that for you in the book format?
No, nothing. As a matter of fact, I added a few things. There was a scene where Debbie Rochon plays Rebecca Richard, this kind of opportunist media woman, that media maven, I called her. She gives a little tribute to Miles at the end of the book, and that wasn't in the original movie, and there were a few other bits of dialogue, but other than that, it's pretty much the same.
Well, one of the questions I like to ask all of our guests going towards the close is, who is this book written for, and what is it that you're hoping it does for the target audience?
It's really written for me seeking recognition, if that doesn't sound too egotistical. No, it's written for comic audience. It's written for the goth audience. It's written for anyone who's an independent artist and that's seeking recognition. It's frustrating, and that hasn't gotten out there yet, and is just doing good work and just wants to reach people that don't know about it. That's the best way I could describe it.
Do you have any advice for anyone who might be writing a story right now and they're looking at making that next step to committing to it being a book?
Yeah, try to always be original. First of all, don't tell anybody, unless it's your spouse or somebody. Don't tell anybody about it, because that will kill the dream. I've learned that the hard way. I used to tell everybody what I'm up to, and I don't do that anymore. Write it down in a notebook. I started it with a bang at the beginning and a bang at the end, and I went from there. I filled in, how do I get through conflict to the end? There's a lot of feeling in the movie. A lot of it's about being betrayed, being promised things, and those things not coming through. And I wanted to get that across. And use any people writing, use your downfalls. Don't look at them, be depressed by them. Write those down. Think about them. Write them down as a scene. And the scenes that you throw away, you'll be using it in your next movie, your next graphic novel.
No, excellent advice, yeah.
You have to set it up, pay it off. Simple as that. Don't mystify things.
No, that's excellent. Rob, thank you for coming on the podcast and for your time. If people would like to see how to get the book or any of your other work, where can they go?
Just go to Amazon.com and FanatiKal will be there. Just type in FanatiKal with a K, not a C. And I have another book coming out of my fine art on YouTube. Just type in the search engine FanatiKal the movie, and you'll see the feature movie FanatiKal and several scenes, some that weren't in the movie, which is great. Or just type in FanatiKal with a K in the search engine on YouTube and you'll find it.
Excellent. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Isaac. Absolute pleasure, my man.
If you'd like to get a copy of FanatiKal, you can find it in the show notes down below. Also, if you'd like to see Robert's movie, you can find a link to that on YouTube down here in the show notes below as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure that you leave us a 5-star review and subscribe so you never miss a new episode, and share it with a friend. Until next time, we'll see you later.